The Black Liberation Army, or BLA, grew directly from the collapse of the Black Panther Party. By the early 1970s, the Panthers had been battered by FBI surveillance, police raids, and internal conflict. Many members believed the dream of community organizing had failed. What remained went underground, forming the BLA, a group that saw itself as a guerrilla army fighting an empire. Their ideology was blunt. America was racist and capitalist at its core. Police were seen not as law enforcement, but as occupiers in black neighborhoods. The solution, they argued, was armed struggle. To kill police officers, rob banks to finance the revolution, and break captured comrades out of prison. The BLA carried out a string of attacks across the 1970s. One of the most infamous came on May 2, 1973, when state troopers stopped a car on the New Jersey Turnpike. Inside were BLA members, Assata Shakur, Sundiata Acoli, and Zaid Shakur. The traffic stop exploded into a shootout. Trooper Werner Forster was killed, Zaid Shakur died in the crossfire, and Assata was captured after being shot twice. Assata became a national symbol. To police, she was a cop killer. To supporters, she was a political prisoner. Convicted of murder, she was sentenced to life plus 33 years. But in 1979, the BLA struck back. 3 armed members stormed the Clinton Correctional Facility for Women in New Jersey. In under 10 minutes, they freed Assata and vanished into the underground. She later surfaced in Cuba, where she remains in exile to this day, listed on the FBI's Most Wanted Terrorists list. The BLA's other legendary moment came on October 20, 1981, when they teamed with white radicals from the May 19th Communist Organization to rob a Brink's armored car in Nanuet, New York. The heist netted $1.6 million, but it spiraled into chaos. A Brink's guard and 2 police officers were killed in the crossfire. Key BLA figures like Mutulu Shakur, Sekou Odinga, and Kawasi Balagoon were captured in the aftermath. By the mid-1980s, the FBI and police had dismantled the BLA through raids, arrests, and long prison sentences. But their story, from the Turnpike shootout to the Brink's robbery, remains one of the darkest chapters in America's domestic conflicts. The Weather Underground emerged from America's college campuses at the end of the 1960s. Originally a radical faction of the Students for a Democratic Society, the group turned to violence after 1969, convinced that peaceful protest would never end the Vietnam War or dismantle systemic racism. Their strategy was bold and unusual. They declared they would bring the war home, striking symbols of American power with bombs, while attempting to avoid civilian casualties. Members lived in secrecy, disappearing into safe houses, adopting false identities, and communicating through coded messages as they built an underground network. Between 1970 and 1975, the Weather Underground carried out a wave of bombings across the country. Their targets included the U.S. Capitol in 1971, the Pentagon in 1972, and the State Department in 1975. Each attack was typically preceded by a warning call to reduce casualties, but the explosions still caused millions of dollars in damage and spread fear that America was under siege from within its own borders. Prominent leaders included Bill Ayers, Bernardine Dohrn, and Mark Rudd, former student activists who radicalized further with every clash against police and every government crackdown. Their manifesto declared open war on the U.S. government and expressed solidarity with global revolutionaries, from the Viet Cong to Cuba. Life underground could not last forever. By the late 1970s, many members resurfaced. Some surrendered and negotiated reduced sentences, while others evaded serious punishment because old cases had grown difficult to prosecute. Figures like Ayers and Dohrn later reappeared in public life, sparking decades of debate and controversy. The Weather Underground never caused as many deaths as groups like the Black Liberation Army, but their campaign of bombings became a lasting symbol of how far political radicals were willing to go, transforming from students in classrooms to militants waging clandestine warfare against their own government. Vincent Leaphart, later renaming himself John Africa, founded Move in Philadelphia in the early 1970s. He rejected modern society, claiming technology, medicine, and government were corrupt. Members lived communally, adopted the surname Africa, ate raw diets, and preached an animal rights-inspired anti-establishment philosophy. Life inside was harsh. Children were denied education and medical care, often left malnourished. Propaganda blasted from loudspeakers day and night. Neighbors complained of filth, rats, and intimidation. Confrontations with police escalated through the late 1970s, culminating in a 1978 shootout that killed Officer James Ramp. 9 Move members were sentenced to long prison terms. In 1985, tensions exploded again. Police surrounded Move's fortified row house in West Philadelphia. After hours of gunfire, officers dropped a satchel bomb from a helicopter onto the roof. The explosion ignited fuel, creating an inferno. Firefighters, under police orders, let the blaze spread. 11 died inside, including 5 children. The fire destroyed 61 homes, displacing 250 residents. Only 2 survived: Ramona Africa and 13-year-old Birdie Africa, who escaped through the flames. The Move bombing remains one of the most controversial acts of domestic police force in U.S. history. Survivors describe the terror of being trapped by fire and bullets, while critics saw the attack as proof of how a cult's extremism and state power collided with devastating results. The Symbionese Liberation Army, or SLA, was one of the most chaotic and cult-like groups of America's radical underground. Founded in California in 1973 by Donald DeFreeze, who styled himself as Cinque, the SLA fused radical leftist rhetoric with DeFreeze's obsession with absolute control and revolutionary theatrics. The group shot to national infamy in February 1974, when they kidnapped Patty Hearst, a 19-year-old heiress to the Hearst newspaper fortune. The SLA demanded that her wealthy family distribute millions of dollars worth of food to the poor. But the case took a shocking turn just weeks later, when surveillance cameras captured Hearst holding a rifle during a bank robbery, apparently transformed from captive to comrade. Beyond kidnappings and robberies, the SLA also turned to assassination. Their first known murder was the 1973 killing of Oakland School Superintendent Marcus Foster, gunned down with cyanide-tipped bullets for policies the group claimed were fascist. But the SLA's reign was short-lived. On May 17, 1974, Los Angeles police surrounded a safe house holding 6 SLA members. The standoff was broadcast live on television as thousands watched in real time. After hours of gunfire, tear gas, and chaos, the house erupted in flames. All 6 members inside, including DeFreeze, were killed in the blaze. Patty Hearst remained underground until 1975, when she was finally captured by the FBI. She was convicted of bank robbery and sentenced to prison, though President Jimmy Carter later commuted her sentence. Hearst testified that she had been brainwashed, held in a closet, and terrorized until she identified with her captors. The SLA was never large, never more than a dozen committed members at its height, but the sheer spectacle of its crimes made it unforgettable. The Hearst kidnapping, the fiery televised shootout, and the group's mixture of cult psychology with armed militancy cemented the SLA as one of the most sensational and bizarre underground movements in American history. The May 19th Communist Organization, known as M19CO, was a clandestine network of white radicals that operated in the late 1970s and early 1980s. Its name came from the shared birthday of revolutionary leaders Ho Chi Minh and Malcolm X, a symbolic nod to both international communism and black liberation. Unlike other militant groups, M19CO positioned itself as an ally and support system for black revolutionary organizations like the Black Liberation Army. At its core, M19CO saw itself as a band of urban guerrillas, striking U.S. military and government targets while funneling resources to imprisoned revolutionaries. They believed America was an imperialist empire, and violent resistance was the only path to justice. Their most notorious moment came on October 20th, 1981, when M19CO members worked hand-in-hand with the BLA to pull off the Brink's armored car robbery in Nanuet, New York. While BLA members provided direct firepower, M19CO figures like Kathy Boudin and David Gilbert helped orchestrate logistics and planning. The robbery netted $1.6 million, but spiraled into bloodshed. A Brink's guard and 2 police officers were killed in the crossfire. Boudin was arrested within hours, and Gilbert was later captured and sentenced to 75 years in prison. M19CO wasn't just about robberies. Between 1982 and 1985, they carried out a series of bombings against symbolic U.S. institutions. Their most famous strike came in 1983, when they detonated a bomb inside the U.S. Capitol building to protest U.S. military involvement in Grenada and Lebanon. While no one was killed, the blast caused hundreds of thousands of dollars in damage and was seen as a shocking breach of national security. Other attacks targeted military facilities and government offices. The group also drew heavily from former members of the Weather Underground, including ideological connections to Bernardine Dohrn and Bill Ayers, who had pioneered the model of underground bombings in the 1970s. M19CO carried that strategy into the next decade, but tied it more directly to supporting the BLA and freeing political prisoners. M19CO was eventually dismantled in the mid-1980s after federal investigations, manhunts, and long prison sentences for many of its members. Yet its story stands out because it showed how America's underground movements sometimes crossed racial and ideological lines. White radicals risked their freedom to fight alongside black revolutionaries, united by the belief that America was an oppressive empire that had to be attacked from within.